you've been on a lot of programs of late. So I wanted to actually first, before I get your analysis on what's going on in Gaza, play a little bit from our friend Barack Obama, because you have actually been talking about, you have a book about woke culture, cancel culture, and I wanted to kind of blend these things together because a lot of the points that Barack Obama made in a Pod Save America appearance are the talking points I feel like are being pushed on us now that the United States finds itself in a quandary with Israel. Blinken was in Tel Aviv late last week, and there's a lot of talk about humanitarian pauses. And so I wanted to play this. I'm just going to pull it up. It's only a couple minutes. Please do tap out if you feel like you want to say something. I'll pause the video because it is 3 minutes long. But when you want to respond, please do just
if
indicate
there's
this.
any chance,
and I'm going to just play it now. And here we go.
If there's any chance of us being able to act constructively to do something, it will require an admission of complexity and maintaining what on the surface may seem contradictory ideas. That what Hamas did was horrific and there's no justification for it. And what is also true is that the occupation and what's happening to Palestinians is unbearable. And what is also true is that there is a history of the Jewish people that may be dismissed unless your grandparents or your great grandparents or your uncle or your aunt tell you stories about the madness of anti-Semitism. And what is true is that there are people right now who are dying who have nothing to do with what Hamas did. And what is true, right? I mean, we can go on for a while. And the problem with the social media and trying to TikTok activism and trying to debate this on that is you can't speak the truth. You can pretend to speak the truth. You can speak one side of the truth. And in some cases, you can try to maintain your moral innocence, but that won't solve the problem. And so if you want to solve the problem, then you have to take in the whole truth. And you then have to admit nobody's hands are clean, that all of us are complicit to some degree.
I'm actually going to stop it there because I think it's a perfect place to stop, given he talks about complicity. Dr. Finkelstein, your reaction.
My first reaction is I wish he would stop rolling up his sleeves, because he hasn't been a community organizer for about 40 years. And even when he was a community organizer, it was for about 2.5 years. And he just became a community organizer to pad his resume so he can get into Harvard Law School. So that's my first reaction. My second reaction is actually what he says is true. I'm not going to dispute that. But there's no bottom line. It's just this is true and that's true and this is true and that's true. And it doesn't get us anywhere. It just, it's a laundry list. It is also true that in the Israel-Palestine conflict, there is always a question about where does one begin. Israelis want to go back 2,000 years ago to stake their claim on the basis of the fact that they were, quote unquote, there first. And then others want to say, what about the 2,000 years that elapsed before the Zionist movement began in the end of the 19th century. So there's always a question of, to quote the title of a book by Edward Said, there's always the question of beginnings. Where do you begin? And it is true that depending on where you begin, there's a certain amount of partisanship. So rather than where to begin, I think probably a better thing to do is, where did things end on October 7th? The protocol right now in the news media is everything began on October 7th. But in fact, October 7th wasn't the beginning. October 7th was the climax. It was the climax of a people being immured in a concentration camp for 20 years. And all of the despair, all of the despondency, all of the depression, combined with all of the accumulated rage and fury of not only a life, your own life destroyed, but during Israel's periodic massacres, high-tech massacres in Gaza, there was a lot of death and destruction. In fact, two of the main massacres in Gaza occurred in the first one, which I'll get to in a moment, under Barack Obama's indirect watch. And the second one, the second main massacre, occurred under Barack Obama's full watch, direct watch. So I referred to the fact a moment ago, which I'm going to reiterate because it's the crucial fact to bear in mind. Beginning in 2006, a brutal, inhumane, illegal blockade on Gaza was imposed. Nobody can go in, nobody can go out. 70% of the population of Gaza comprises refugees and the descendants of refugees. That is, people who were expelled from what became the State of Israel in 1948, and their descendants. That's 70% of the population of Gaza. They live in refugee camps, like the one that Israel dropped 2,000-pound bombs on a couple of days ago, Jabalia camp. Now, half the population of Gaza comprises children, about 1,100,000 of the people in Gaza who are presently on the receiving end of this high-tech genocidal assault in Gaza are children. So this population has been immured in this concentration camp. About one half the population suffers from what's called severe food insecurity. One half of the population is unemployed. 60% of the youth are unemployed. And beyond all the despair, despondency, depression that this situation induces, Gaza is among the most densely populated places on God's earth. It's 25 miles long, less than the length of a marathon, and it's 5 miles wide. For those of you who live in New York City, it's the distance from NYU to Columbia University. Now, on top of that, as I said, the fact that the people of Gaza have no past. The young folks who broke through the gates of Gaza, most of them were born in Gaza concentration camp. They're about 18, 20 years old. They were born in Gaza concentration camp. In 2008-9, December 26th till January 17th, Israel launched the first of its major. It's launched numerous murderous operations on Gaza. I can't even commit to memory the names because there are just so many. But on Operation Cast Lead in 2008-9 was the first large-scale massacre, relatively speaking. Even the small ones were big massacres, but relatively speaking, Operation Cast Lead was quantitatively in a different category. Israel killed about 1,400 Palestinians, 350 of them children. Now, that date may sound familiar to you because Israel broke the ceasefire with Hamas on November 4th, 2008, because that was election day, and all the cameras were focused on the election of the first purportedly Black president in American history. Now, when the fighting began, Israel broke the ceasefire on November 4th, and then full-scale fighting began December 26th. Barack Obama was already president-elect. He didn't say anything while Gaza was being systematically, methodically destroyed, except when, when he said something? There's a juxtaposition between January 17th, when the Israeli Hightech Massacre ended, and January 20th. January 20th was inauguration. So when Barack Obama was about to be officially inaugurated as president, he told Israel to stop because he didn't want any distractions in Gaza. And that's when Israel stopped. He could have said it 2 days earlier. He could have said it 3 days earlier. But this stupefying narcissist, the only thing he cared about was the election, the inauguration, his anointment. Now, come 2014, I'm skipping various massacres. In 2014, there was another high-tech massacre on a much larger scale, an Operation Cast Lead. It was called Operation Protective Edge. It ran from July 8th to August 26th, 51 days. Israel killed about 2,200 Palestinians, of whom 550 were children. And every day, Saint Barak went before the cameras and said Israel has a right to defend itself, allowing for that second, much larger high-tech massacre. Israel destroyed 18,000 civilian homes. I mean, right now, it's of a totally different magnitude. Already, Israel has destroyed about half of the homes in Gaza. The last estimate I read was 43% have been, gone, vanished in thin air, vaporized. So that was the life, in quotation marks, that the people of Gaza lived. And so what happened, and there was no possibility anything would change. For the past 3 years, Gaza, the Palestine issue completely disappeared from the news. All the talk, all the punditry was about this deal between Saudi Arabia, the United States, and Israel that would normalize relations. And once relations were normalized, the Palestine question would be effectively liquidated. That was the hope, that was the expectation, that the people of Gaza in particular would just be left to languish and die in this concentration camp. And so what happened on October 7th was the climax and the climax and the culmination of this process of trying to liquidate, contain the Palestine question, the Gaza question, by confining these people. David Cameron, the Conservative Prime Minister of the UK, called it an open-air prison. Baruch Kimmerling, the Hebrew University scholar, called it a concentration camp. Actually, I just learned today from an email that leading Israeli officials called it a concentration camp, called Gaza a concentration camp. I'll be using that in the coming weeks. I just have to confirm everything. And so on October 7th, a constituent element of the people of Gaza engaged in a slave revolt. And anyone who knows the history of slave revolts in the US, in Haiti, slave revolts are very ugly affairs. Now, exactly what happened on that day, I think we can say two things. Number one, atrocities of a significant magnitude occurred. But number two, there are still many gray areas. Were there actual beheadings of children? Were there rapes? And how many of the people were killed not by Hamas militants outright, but in the course of crossfire and firefights? We don't know the answers to those questions just yet, but I'm willing to acknowledge atrocities occurred, and atrocities have occurred across the history of slave revolts in the United States. The Nat Turner Revolt, which is the largest slave revolt in our history. Nat Turner gave the order to his group, kill all whites. That was the order. And they did behead babies. That's not problematic. And obviously it's not something to celebrate, though it should be noted that the Nat Turner Rebellion currently, in our current cultural moment, it occupies a respected place in American history. So that, I think, is the important corrective. Barack Obama it's Barack Obama. He doesn't say anything. He's such a zero that he's a -1. The only place where I've studied him quite closely in a book I just wrote. I devoted about 150 pages to his presidency. The only thing he seemed to have any kind of real facility in was basketball, and he did know the game. He does know the game. But once you get past the basketball court, you might as well talk to an avocado.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I've written extensively on him too, and his legacy of being a more effective evil for the war machine. And he certainly, when he says he has blood, maybe has blood on his hands or complicity in this and what's going on now with regards to Palestine, surely he does have complicity in it.
Well, he clearly had the power to stop it.
Right.
He told them January 17th, stop, my inauguration is coming. And they stopped.
Thank you for tuning in to my latest video. I appreciate all of your support. This channel, however, needs your help. I am seeking to make this channel more sustainable in the long term and upgrade necessary equipment to ensure that this work continues onward and makes progress to give you all of the geopolitical analysis that you all deserve. For that reason, I'm asking you to become a member of my Patreon community at patreon.com/DannyHightFong. You can find that link in the video description or in the pinned comment below. For whatever amount you choose to give, just know you are supporting independent media that you can't find anywhere else. Thank you so much, and I look forward to the next video.